Private schools lose a High Court battle against Starmer's VAT raid on fees. I'm going to read into this more from The Independent, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with an article from The Independent with the headline that private schools lose a High Court battle against Starmer's VAT raid on fees. Around 11,000 pupils have already left private schooling since the policy came into force in January. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who have, in my comment section, have said that the VAT policy is unfair. Private schools shouldn't have to pay more. It's not... You know, you're holding back, you're holding back kids within the private education sector and whatnot, trying to basically throw any excuses that they need to justify it. And well, really, and I've had people make those arguments in the comment section. Well, I want to show you this graph, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to have a look yourself here. So this graph, brought by the Financial Times, is sourced from the Institute for Physical Studies. This shows the gap between state and private school funding that has widened. It's per pupil funding there, just for reference. Now, the latest I have is 2021. So, of course, it's a couple of years behind. So, there's yet to be updated yet. But it's not rocket science to see here that since 2010 onwards, you can see quite clearly here on this graph that although, yes, private school has always had more funding than state school, which is totally which is, in their opinion, is justifiable. I personally don't think so. But you can see from 2010 that state school funding has dipped, and it's dipped even more, and it's dipped even more, and it only got a little bit of a boost in 2021 there, and you can see there that private funding just continued to go up, and you can kind of see there that the gap has widened significantly when you look back before 2010 when the gap was a lot closer, and you could see that state schools were getting adequate funding that they needed all the way up to 2010, and then austerity came along. The Conservatives have taken that away. Now, why am I showing this graph, and why is this important before we come back to the original article? This is important for people to understand the context here. If you, like me, believe that every single child deserves the best possible education, and no, not everyone can afford to take their children into private school, state schools need adequate funding in order to be able to succeed. And quite clearly, you can see that that since 2010, since the Coalition and the Conservatives, both, so Lib Dems need to take their fair share of responsibility for this, you can see that the funding for state schools has not been good enough, whereas private schools have continued to get the funding that they need. And for all those, again, screaming cry foul, well, I'm sorry, but I want every single child to be given the best opportunities possible. And state schools need a huge amount of boost of money injected into them right now, more than ever before. That gap that gap there from 2020 to 2021 is far too wide. It's far too wide. It needs to be reduced, guys. It really, really does. It's not fair that state schools are not getting the adequate funding that they need. So, a group of private schools, pupils and their parents have lost a High Court challenge over Labour's imposition on VAT on fees. It comes after 6 families last year launched a legal challenge against the government's controversial tax raid, which imposed a 20% VAT on private schools, claiming it is discriminatory against certain children, such as those with special education needs, SEM. Supported by the Independent Schools Council, the ISC, which represents 1,400 independent schools, the family sought a declaration of incompatibility under Section 4 of the Human Rights Act, acting that the new tax is incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights, which is, nonsense. This is private schools. You're being paid huge amounts of money for the best education in the world, for some of the best education on the planet. This has nothing to do with human rights at all. But Dame Victoria Sharp, Lord Justice Newey and Mr. Justice Chamberlain said in a 94-page decision that while the legislation does interfere with some groups' human rights, I don't agree with that, but okay, there is a broad margin of discretion in deciding how to balance the interests of those adversely affected by the policy against the interests of others who may gain from public provision funded by the money that it will raise. Remember, the money that is being raised from the private VAT is to go towards state schools. And remember, like I showed you the graph. private schools get plenty of money. So all those crying foul about this, like, they have enough money. It's about fixing our state school education. During a hearing in April, Lord David Pennick, KC, representing one group of children and their parents, said that the needs of some children currently in private school could not be met by the state school. And whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? The High Court was told that as well as religious beliefs and SEN, some children are privately educated because of a need for a single-sex environment, because of previous abuse, or because they are only temporarily in the UK and need to be educated in line with their home national curriculum. But Sir James Eel KC, representing the Treasury, HMRC and the Department of Education, said abolishing the VAT exemption for private school fees was a prominent feature of Labour's manifesto in the last general election. While the legal challenge would not be able to halt the VAT policy or reverse it even if it is successful, it would have been a major blow to ministers and piled pressure on them to consider further exemptions. The government has estimated that the tax will raise £1.7 billion per year by 2029-2030, money which ministers will say will use to fund 6,500 new teachers for state schools. So far, private school pupil numbers have fallen by more than 11,000 in England following the tax hike. DFE data shows in January 2025 there were around 582,500 pupils in English private schools, down from 593 at the same point last year. When the policy was introduced, Treasury impact assessments estimate that private school fees would increase by around 10% as a result of the introduction of VAT. But in May, ISC figures showed that fees have increased by 22.6% in the past year, with parents now paying out more than $22,000 a year on average. Treasury predicts that 35,000 pupils would move into UK state schools in the long-term steady state. A further 2,000 children would leave private school, the department estimated, consisting of international pupils who do not move into UK state system or domestic pupils who will move into homeschooling. The ISC has been contacted for comment. Now, I want to make this clear. Absolutely, there is going to be a major shift in some children's education here. And I accept that. I accept that criticism, and I accept that there will be a significant impacts in that. I'm not debating the impact on the children that who are already in private school, and some of them may have to go into state school or other school and as a result of this decision. Quote what the words I said there. I said some. We're talking about every single child in the UK. Yeah, the needs of all should not be put behind the needs of a few. Okay, this is about there are lots of children in the UK who have not been getting the education that they need for a long, long time because of what the Conservatives have done. The Conservatives and Liberal Democrats, don't forget them, when it comes to the funding of state schools. For those arguing that the funding was not there for state schools, your anger and your frustration should not be at the current Labour government. Your anger and frustration should have been at the Conservatives. Your anger and frustration should have been at them making sure that they are investing in state schools, which they did not do. That's where your frustration and anger should be lying. Because if they were investing in our state schools like they have been investing in our private, we would not be in this situation. But that is the reality. Austerity impacted state schools while you guys continue to rack up plenty of cash. I'm sorry, but it's not fair. That's the reality. And again, I emphasize with those who have to make these difficult changes, and it's not easy changes, and I accept that. I accept those criticisms who come up in the comments and saying that the impact on this has been devastating for my child. And you're absolutely right. There will be casualties in this change, but it's a necessary one. I strongly support the government's decision on this VAT. I really, really do. There needs to be huge amount of funding needs to come out of private school, and it needs to be brought into the state school, because not all of it can come straight from the government. That gap from the graph I showed you needs to be reduced. It's not good enough. And again, if you have a problem with that, take it up with the Conservatives who didn't invest in state schools. So what do you guys think? What do you guys make of the High Court battle against Starmer's VAT raid on fees. What do you guys make of the graph that I show you? Do you agree with me that it is right that private schools should pay more into the state schools? Let me know your thoughts and more on all this down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting and informative, hit that like button, share it across social media, subscribe if you haven't already, check out Rumble and Patreon for exclusive content, and if you want to financially support me in the work that I do, hit the join button down below to become a YouTube member. So thank you all so much for listening. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.